Where to place your rosary. During Lent to protect your family. Have you ever felt it? That invisible weight that settles over your home during the 40 days of Lent, as if the very walls of your house have become a battlefield you cannot see, but can absolutely feel. The irritation that rises without cause, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to cure, the sudden distance between the people you love most, the short words and long silences that fill the rooms where joy used to live. You have noticed it, have you not? That Lent, rather than bringing only peace and recollection, often begins with a strange intensification of the battles closest to your heart. And today, you are going to understand why that is, and more importantly, what you can do about it with the simplest and most powerful spiritual weapon the Church has ever placed in the hands of a family. Saint Teresa of Avila, the great doctor of the Church born in 1515, was a woman who understood the invisible world with breathtaking clarity. She had not read about spiritual combat in comfortable books while sitting in a safe armchair. She had lived it. She had wrestled with it in the silence of her cell, in the long corridors of her reformed convents, in the pages of her most intimate writings. In her autobiographical work known as The Book of Her Life, she describes experiences of spiritual opposition so vivid and tangible that even centuries later, her words carry the weight of someone who has stood at the edge of the abyss and returned with a lantern for the rest of us. She wrote with the authority of personal testimony, not theory. And it is that testimony we turn to today, because what she discovered about defending the soul and the home it inhabits is as urgently relevant in this Lent as it was in her own century. This teaching is not a collection of superstitions. It is not magical thinking dressed in holy language. It is rooted in the living tradition of the Catholic Church, in the theology of sacramentals as described in the Catechism, and in Scripture's command to put on the full armor of God. As St. Paul writes in his letter to the Ephesians, what you are about to encounter is a deeply practical and spiritually grounded guide to using your rosary, not merely as a devotional object you hold during prayer time, but as a living sacramental presence throughout the spaces where your family breathes, rests, argues, reconciles, and grows. The places where you put your rosary during these 40 days matter far more than most Catholics have ever been told. And once you understand why, you will never tuck it back into a drawer again. Think for a moment about the last time you truly felt safe inside your own home. Not physically safe, but spiritually safe, as if the very atmosphere of the house was holding your family together rather than pulling it apart. That feeling is not an accident, and neither is its absence. When your rosary finds its proper place in that environment, something shifts. Something ancient and merciful is activated. Something in the dark retreats. Today, you are going to learn exactly where to place it, and exactly why each placement carries the weight of heaven behind it. There is an image that Saint Teresa describes in her interior castle, one of the most important spiritual texts in the history of Christian mysticism, that cuts straight to the heart of what Lent is really about for a family. She imagines the soul as a magnificent castle of crystal and diamond, filled with countless rooms, each more luminous than the last, drawing the soul deeper into the presence of God at the very center. But here is what most people overlook when they read that beautiful image. She also describes what surrounds the castle. Outside its walls, in the darkness just beyond the light of those interior rooms, there are forces that watch and wait. They cannot enter by force, but they can whisper through the cracks. They can make the inhabitants of the castle forget that they are living in a palace and begin to behave as though they are living in ruins. Does that description remind you of anything in your own household? Your home is, in the deepest theological sense, an outward reflection of the interior castle of the souls that dwell within it. What happens in the spiritual life of the individuals who share a roof together ripples outward and shapes the atmosphere that everyone breathes. When a family neglects prayer, when the sacraments grow distant, when Lent passes like any other season without a change of heart, the castle begins to feel like those ruins Teresa warned about. Not because God has abandoned it, never that, but because the inhabitants have stopped defending it. They have left the gates unguarded. And during Lent in particular, when the Church calls every soul to heightened alertness, the danger of spiritual negligence is not diminished. It is intensified. Because the enemy of souls does not observe a truce during the season of conversion. He presses hardest precisely when conversion is most possible. Saint Teresa was not a woman given to fear. One of the most well-known accounts from her autobiography involves an experience during prayer in which she perceived the presence of something hostile and dark. Her response, which she describes with remarkable composure, was not to flee or panic. She reached for the weapons the Church had given her, holy water and the sign of the cross, and she used them with the confidence of a soldier whose commanding general has already won the war. She writes that the enemy retreated instantly when confronted with these signs of faith. This is not a fairy tale. This is the testimony of a doctor of the Church, a woman whose interior life was examined and confirmed by the highest authorities of her day. When she tells you that the visible signs of faith carry real spiritual power, she is not speaking metaphorically. She is reporting from the field, and that brings us to the Rosary. Not as a piece of jewelry, not as a sentimental heirloom, not as a decorative item laid out on special occasions and tucked away the rest of the time. The Rosary is a sacramental, which the Catechism of the Catholic Church defines in paragraph 1667 as a sacred sign through which spiritual effects are signified and obtained by the intercession of the Church. Paragraph 1670 clarifies that sacramentals dispose the soul to receive grace and cooperate with it. A blessed rosary placed with intention is not a magic charm. It is a sign laden with the intercession of the Church, saturated with the prayers of millions of believers across the centuries, connected to the maternal mediation of Our Lady herself. To keep it in a drawer is not just a missed opportunity. It is a failure to use the armor you have been given. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the center of your home. Not the most beautiful room, but the most alive one. The place where voices overlap, where meals are eaten, where disagreements begin, and where, if grace is present, they also end. Maybe it is the kitchen table, worn smooth by years of elbows and homework and shared meals. Maybe it is the living room sofa, the place where something honest is occasionally said between family members who are otherwise moving too fast to speak truthfully. Whatever that central gathering place is, it is the heart of your domestic church. And like every heart, it is vulnerable. During Lent, as your family attempts the always difficult work of conversion, the tensions that live beneath the surface of daily life tend to rise and become visible. Do you recognize that experience? That particular Lenten friction? The first and most important placement for your rosary during these 40 days is in that central gathering space. Not in a case, not behind glass, but visible, present, alive on the table or shelf at the heart of your home. Set it beside a Bible. Place a small candle near it. Let it be seen by every person who passes through that room. The theology behind this practice is deeply connected to the nature of sacramentals as reminders that call the soul back to its true orientation. When you are about to say something to your spouse that you cannot take back, and your eyes fall on those blessed beads, something in you pauses. Not because the object is magical, but because your faith is real. And the sight of that sacred sign reconnects you to the part of yourself that knows better. Grace does not need dramatic moments to act. It needs open doors. The visible rosary is an open door. Saint Teresa wrote with great urgency about the power of visible signs of faith in the daily life of a Christian. In her Way of Perfection, a text she composed as a practical guide for the sisters of her Reformed communities, she emphasized again and again that the soul needs physical anchors to keep it oriented toward God in the midst of ordinary life. A rosary placed at the center of your home is exactly that kind of anchor. It is a silent proclamation that this table, this family, this ordinary Tuesday afternoon belongs to Christ. It does not eliminate conflict. What it does is create a sacred pause, a moment of spiritual friction that gives grace the opportunity to act before sin does. In a home where the rosary is visible at the heart of shared life, the arguments that happen tend to be shorter, because something keeps calling the fighters back to what actually matters. There is also a communal dimension to this placement that should not be overlooked. When a family sees the rosary at the center of their shared life, it creates a subtle but powerful shared identity. We are people who pray. We are people who belong to Our Lady. We are people who are trying even when we fail, even when we are tired, even when Lent feels like a burden instead of a gift. That identity, reinforced day after day by the presence of that sacramental in your shared space, becomes a living fortress around the family unit itself. During Lent, when the whole church is leaning together into the discipline of conversion, that fortress is not just helpful, it is essential. Place your rosary at the heart of your home today, and watch what begins to shift in the atmosphere of the place where your family lives its real life. Night is when the walls come down. You know this already, perhaps better than you would like to. The rational defenses that hold you together during the day, the sense of control, the performance of competence, the busyness that keeps you from feeling too much. All of it dissolves when the lights go out. And in that dissolution, the soul becomes extraordinarily sensitive, both to darkness and to light, both to fear and to peace, both to the whispers of the enemy and to the quiet voice of God. Saint Teresa of Avila knew this territory intimately. In her Book of Her Life, she writes at length about the spiritual experiences she underwent during the nighttime hours, encounters she understood as real and serious. She did not pretend the night was neutral ground. She prepared for it with the same deliberateness a watchman prepares for his post. The second placement for your rosary during this Lent is in your bedroom, under your pillow, or on your nightstand, close enough to touch when you reach for it in the dark. This is not superstition. It is the application of a deeply Catholic principle that Teresa herself embodied. She writes in her autobiography that she kept holy water and the sign of the cross as her primary defenses during periods of nocturnal spiritual oppression. The Rosary, as a blessed sacramental, carries a similar protective presence. When you place it beside where you sleep, you are making a deliberate spiritual declaration. You are saying, with the placement of that sacred object, that this space where your body rests and your subconscious mind becomes permeable is consecrated ground. It belongs to Christ. It belongs to Our Lady. Nothing hostile is welcome here. Think about what happens in the bedroom during Lent for a person trying to fast, pray, and be a better version of themselves while also being exhausted and human. The anxieties about children, finances, health, and the future. These are the specific territories where the spirit of discouragement does its most effective work. Teresa describes this spirit with great clarity in her writings, warning that the enemy's goal is often not dramatic temptation, but simple, grinding despondency. A heaviness that makes everything feel hopeless. A sadness without a clear object that saps the soul of its courage and its joy. Have you felt that sadness? Have you lain awake in the dark wondering if your prayers are reaching anywhere at all? If so, you are not alone, and you are not abandoned. The rosary on your nightstand is a response to that darkness that does not require words. In moments of nighttime anxiety, when your mind begins its familiar circling pattern of worry and what if, you reach for those beads and you touch them. You do not even have to pray the full rosary. Sometimes, at 2 a.m. when your heart is frightened, just holding the crucifix and saying the name of Jesus once is enough to break the circuit of fear. Because you are not alone in that room. You never were. Our Lady is present wherever her rosary is held in faith. And she is, as the Church has always proclaimed, the woman whose very presence scatters the darkness. Let her stand guard over your sleep during these 40 sacred days. Place her weapon within reach of your resting hand. You carry your battles with you wherever you go. You already know this. The anxiety that woke you at 3 a.m. does not politely stay home when you leave for work. It rides with you on the bus, It sits beside you in the meeting. It tightens your chest when you stand in line at the grocery store, and your mind suddenly ambushes you with a fear you thought you had set aside. Lent is a time of intensified spiritual purification, which means it is also a time of intensified spiritual pressure, and that pressure does not confine itself to the hours when you are formally praying. It follows you into the ordinary moments of your day and uses them as opportunities to undermine the conversion you are attempting. The question is not whether the battle will come to you in the streets and the offices and the ordinary routines of your life. The question is whether you will be armed when it does. Saint Teresa of Avila consistently emphasized that we are not purely spiritual beings floating above the material world. We are embodied creatures, and our faith must engage our bodies as well as our minds and hearts. This is why the Church has always used physical signs, blessed objects, water, oil, candles, not because the material objects possess power in themselves, but because we receive and transmit grace through our physical senses. Teresa never dismissed the importance of physical engagement with the things of God. She embraced it as fitting for creatures made of both dust and spirit. Carrying a small rosary in your pocket during Lent is an expression of this theological truth, a way of bringing the sacred into the physical space of your daily life, rather than leaving it behind at the church door. The practice is simple and requires no special preparation. You take a small rosary, a pocket rosary, or a decade ring, and you place it in the pocket of your coat, your pants, your work bag. During the day, when you feel anxiety beginning to rise, when you sense the creeping edge of a temptation, when someone says something that ignites your anger, and you know you have about 3 seconds to choose a better response, you slide your hand into your pocket and you touch the beads or the cross. That physical contact, united with even the smallest act of interior will, is what Teresa would recognize as the soul reaching for its anchor in a moment of storm. It is a physical act of faith, a tiny prayer made with your hand when your lips have no time and your mind has no space. And those tiny prayers, strung together across the course of a day, form a chain of protection around your soul that the enemy finds remarkably difficult to break. Do not underestimate the power of this practice simply because it is small. Saint Teresa was the most rigorous of spiritual teachers, and she had no patience for spiritual inflation. She would tell you plainly that the spiritual life is built on exactly these kinds of small, repeated acts of commitment. A finger touching a cross at the moment of temptation, a whispered name of Mary when fear begins to grip, a breath consciously offered to God before a difficult conversation. These are not grand gestures. They are the daily fabric of a sanctified life. And Lent, more than any other season, is the time to weave that fabric more carefully, to close the gaps through which the cold gets in, to make your daily life a more continuous and deliberate act of faith. Your pocket rosary is not an accessory. It is armor. Wear it. There is something ancient and deeply biblical about the practice of marking the entrance to a home with a sacred sign. The people of Israel, on the night of the Passover, described in the 12th chapter of Exodus, were commanded to mark the doorposts of their homes with the blood of the Lamb. This was not a decorative choice or a cultural custom. It was a theological act, a declaration that the people inside belonged to God, that this threshold was a boundary between the consecrated and the unconsecrated. The Church, in her wisdom, has always carried this instinct forward through the history of Christian piety, maintaining the same fundamental conviction across every century. The entrance to a Christian home is a sacred threshold, and it ought to be marked as such. Placing your rosary near the front door of your home during this Lent is a continuation of this ancient and holy practice, not as a magic ward, not as a superstitious charm, but as a sacramental presence that sanctifies the coming and going of every person who passes through that door. The Catechism makes clear that blessed sacramentals carry the intercession of the entire Church with them. When your rosary is near the door, it is not just a personal devotion. It is a sign that your household stands under the protection and blessing of the whole body of Christ, of the Church militant and triumphant. of all the saints who have prayed these same mysteries across 20 centuries of Christian history. That is a vast and luminous cloud of witnesses gathered at your threshold, and it is not a small thing to claim for a doorway. Consider what happens practically when the rosary is placed near your door. Each morning as you leave, you see it. Perhaps you touch it. Perhaps you make the sign of the cross. Perhaps you simply pause for the space of one breath and remember who you are and whose you are. That pause, that tiny moment of sacred recollection before you plunge into the noise and demand of the world, is exactly what Teresa describes when she writes about the importance of gathering yourself before turning outward to engage with everything the day will demand. The rosary at the door invites this gesture every single time you pass it, both leaving and returning. And when you return at the end of the day, touching it as you cross the threshold is a way of saying with your hand what your heart means. I am leaving the world at this door and entering something sacred. There is also a dimension of this practice that pertains specifically to children, who need to see faith lived not only in church, but in the ordinary architecture of daily life. The rosary near the door says something to a child every single day. It says this house has a guardian. It says before we go out, we are under her protection. It says when we come back, we return to a place that belongs to God. Children absorb these messages not through explanation, but through repetition, through the accumulated impressions of 1,000 mornings and 1,000 evenings in which the sacred was simply present and visible. That quiet, consistent formation is among the most powerful gifts you can give them in a world that offers so many competing claims on their hearts and their loyalty. Let us speak now about what happens inside you during Lent when you begin to feel the resistance. Because you will feel it. You may already be feeling it. The resistance rarely comes as a dramatic refusal. It comes in the form of a very reasonable-sounding voice that says, I am too tired tonight. I will start tomorrow. The children are already asleep. There is nothing wrong with skipping one day. That voice is patient, consistent, and it sounds almost exactly like your own inner monologue, which is precisely what makes it so effective. Saint Teresa warned her sisters about this specific form of spiritual drift throughout her writings. She called it tepidity, not cold rejection of God, but lukewarm drift, the slow cooling of devotion through 1,000 small concessions that each seem individually harmless, but which together hollow out the interior life. The antidote to tepidity, according to Teresa, is not guilt and not self-condemnation. She was remarkably clear on this point, because she had watched people collapse into spiritual paralysis through an excess of guilt, and she knew that this was not genuine conversion, but another trap of the enemy of the soul. The antidote is what she called determined determination, a phrase she uses repeatedly in her writings that might sound redundant until you understand what she means. She means the decision to begin again, immediately, without waiting for the moment to feel right, without waiting for the emotion of devotion to return, without waiting to feel prepared or worthy or spiritually elevated. You pick up the rosary, you say the first word of the creed, and you begin. Not because you feel like it, because you have decided that this is who you are. That decision, renewed each day, is the foundation of the spiritual life. Have you experienced a Lent that actually changed you? Not just one that you endured, not just 40 days of slightly reduced comfort and one extra Mass per week, but a Lent that left you genuinely different in October than you were in February. That kind of Lent is available to you and to your family, but it requires the determined determination Teresa describes, the willingness to place the rosary in its positions, and then to actually use it, even when you are tired, even when the mysteries feel abstract, even when your prayer feels thin and mechanical. Teresa is deeply reassuring on this last point. She writes extensively about distraction during prayer, about the restlessness of the mind that refuses to cooperate with the will's desire for recollection. Her teaching is consistent and merciful. God does not judge the quality of your prayer by the quality of your attention. He honors the fidelity of your return. The family that prays the rosary together during Lent builds something that no external crisis can easily dismantle. This is the lived experience of countless families across every century of the Church's history, confirmed by the testimony of saints and ordinary believers alike. When children see their parents kneel together and pray, something is planted in them that goes deeper than catechism class, deeper than homilies, deeper than any formal religious instruction. It is the seed of lived faith, of faith as something that the people they love most actually do with their bodies and their voices and their time. Teresa, who wrote so movingly about the formation of the soul through example and community, would understand immediately that a family kneeling together over a rosary during Lent is not just praying. It is building a castle together, stone by stone, bead by bead, prayer by prayer. There is a mystery at the heart of Lent that the world does not understand, and that even many Catholics have only partially grasped. It is this: the discipline of these 40 days is not something to be minimized or survived until Easter arrives. It is something to be entered. Willingly, consciously, in union with Christ, who entered the desert willingly and spent 40 days there in prayer and combat and preparation. The Church does not ask you to suffer for the sake of suffering. She asks you to suffer in union with the one whose suffering was redemptive, whose cross was not the end of the story, but the door through which the whole human race was invited to pass into resurrection. When you understand Lent this way, the weapons the Church gives you for this season take on a different character. The Rosary is not just a defensive tool against the attacks of the enemy. It is a road that leads somewhere real. The mysteries of the Rosary, prayed slowly and with attention during Lent, are a specific kind of spiritual journey. The sorrowful mysteries in particular, the agony in the garden, the scourging, the crowning with thorns, the carrying of the cross, the crucifixion, these are not meditations designed to produce sadness or morbid dwelling on pain. They are windows into the love of God made flesh. When you kneel before your rosary in the heart of your home during these 40 days, and you meditate on Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, sweating blood in the darkness while his closest friends sleep, you are not wallowing in desolation. You are entering into solidarity with the most important act of love in human history. You are saying with your prayer, I want to understand what you did. I want to be present to it. I want to be changed by it. Saint Teresa, in her profound focus on Christ, always returned to his sufferings as the great school of the soul. She understood that the soul which meditates on the passion of Christ with real attention and real compassion is slowly, almost imperceptibly, being formed into the image of the one it contemplates. She did not use abstract theological language about this. She spoke of it in terms of love. She would say, when you look at Christ on the cross with love, Christ looks at you. And that exchange of gazes changes you from the inside out, in ways that no amount of willpower or self-improvement could accomplish on its own. This is what the Rosary, prayed with faith in your Lenten home, makes available to you and to every member of your family who participates in it. Your family is not just a collection of individuals who happen to share an address. It is a domestic church, a small community of souls that the Church has always understood as the primary place where faith is lived and transmitted, and sometimes lost, and sometimes recovered. The spiritual health of your family is not a private matter. It is a theological matter, a matter of eternal significance. During Lent, when the whole Church is pressing toward conversion, you have an opportunity that comes only once a year to press in with your whole household. The Rosary, in its strategic places, seen daily, touched daily, prayed daily, is the instrument through which that opportunity becomes concrete. Do not let it pass. Do not let another Lent go by in which the Rosary sleeps in a drawer, while the battles of your household go unfought and unresolved. The great mystics of the Catholic tradition share a common conviction that the spiritual life is not a solo project. It is not something that happens in isolation between an individual soul and God, with all other human relationships left outside the door of the chapel. The soul grows in the context of its loves and its commitments and its community. Teresa of Avila, who lived most of her adult life in religious community, understood this deeply. She wrote extensively about how the quality of shared life shaped the interior life of each individual within it. She knew that you cannot flourish spiritually in isolation from those you love and those you live with. The rosary placed in the shared spaces of your home is an acknowledgement of this communal dimension of the spiritual life. There are families who will read these words and feel something close to grief, because the household they are imagining does not match the household they actually inhabit. Perhaps the tensions in your home are not small. Perhaps the conflicts are deep and the wounds are real, and the distance between family members sometimes feels unbridgeable. Perhaps Lent itself has already brought some of that pain to the surface, which it tends to do, because purification is never comfortable. If that is your situation, hear this clearly. The Rosary is not only for holy families, it is especially for struggling ones. Our Lady did not choose to appear at Fatima to a family of spiritual paragons. She appeared to 3 ordinary children from an ordinary village, and she gave them the Rosary as both a call to conversion and a consolation in hardship. Saint Teresa knew about family difficulty. She writes movingly in her autobiography about the pain of losing her mother at the age of 12, and about how deeply that loss shaped her interior life and her hunger for a maternal presence in God and in Our Lady. She did not have a life of domestic tranquility. She had grief and conflict and complexity. And out of that complexity, through years of prayer and struggle and recommitment and failure, and beginning again, she was transformed into one of the greatest spiritual witnesses in the history of Christianity. Her story is not the story of someone who had everything perfectly arranged and therefore found God easily. It is the story of someone who found God in the middle of the mess. And she would tell you, with the directness and warmth that characterize all her writings, that you can too. So let this Lent be different from the ones that passed without leaving a mark. Let the Rosary come out of the drawer and take its place in the life of your household, not as a decoration and not as a passive object, but as a living call to prayer and a real instrument of grace. Place it at the center of the table where your family gathers. Slide it under the pillow where you lay your head. Tuck it in the pocket of the coat you wear when you face the world. Place it near the door that marks the boundary between your home and everything outside it. And in each of these places, let it call you, day by day, into the prayer that it represents. Let the sight of it provoke you. Let the touch of it steady you. Let the prayer of it change you. Because that is what it is for. Not to sit in a sacred corner while the real battles of your life are fought without it, but to be wielded, held, prayed, worn, placed with intention and used with faith. This is where everything comes together. This is the moment of choosing. Because knowing where to place your Rosary is ultimately not information. It is an invitation. And an invitation requires a response. Saint Teresa of Avila, who was nothing if not a woman of practical action, who responded to her mystical experiences, not by retreating into passive enjoyment, but by founding 17 reformed monasteries and writing 4 major works of spiritual theology. This woman would not be satisfied with a response that stayed in the realm of ideas. She would want to know, what are you going to do today? Not tomorrow, not when Lent is more convenient. Today. Today, when this narration is finished, you will find your Rosary. If you do not know where it is, that is already telling you something important, and it is not too late to change it. You will find your Rosary, and you will place it in the center of the room where your family gathers most often.